Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And we have some weather. We have some very bad weather. And I got a call a few minutes ago that KGRA radio, their power is down. So they are not, we're not on KGRA radio tonight. We're still on YouTube, of course, and Facebook. And so, and because of that, we can't have phone calls this evening, but I'll be watching chat. And one thing I do have to say to the people in chat, that if you have a question, it's better if you put it in all caps, and that way it'll stand out and I'll be able to see it. Not that I will ask all questions, but if I think it's a good question, I will ask it. I'll actually put it up on the screen so the guest can actually read it as well. So we have a tropical storm warning up here. I'm up in Maine, and it hasn't hit us yet, but I will tell you, if I see a funnel out the window, a funnel cloud, I am going to say good night, or we could lose power. I don't know. It might be later on this evening that it happens to hit up here. I wanted to play this clip because this hasn't happened in 45 years, and the Dragon SpaceX splashdown. I love it.
And there we have confirmation of splashdown. Dragon has returned to planet Earth. It is now back home, and you can see on your screen our two fast boats racing out to the...
Now, they were actually clapping before it hit the water, so they had good faith it was going to actually do the splashdown. Anyway, I used to love watching those years ago, and then I realized that it was 1975. Wow, that's a long time ago. So our guest this evening is Linda Zimmermann, and she'll be talking about animal behavior and UFOs. Well, that actually reminds me, I got this email just a couple of hours ago. Hi, Martin. Looking forward to tonight's show. I have 3 dogs who have a crazy hour each Tuesday evening. They run around the house, they wrestle, they incessantly bark. It's bedlam, and then suddenly they stop and go to sleep like clockwork. Their craziness coincides with the airing of your show. Coincidence? By Duncan. Thank you, Duncan, for that. Gave me a good laugh. Anyway, don't forget to check out our website, podcastufo.com. And while you're there, check out the blog this week by Charles Lear, and that's Officer Herbert Schirmer and the UFO. It's a story really about brutal behavior toward a Nebraska police officer that actually had the courage to talk about his UFO sighting in 1967. And he was just horribly treated, in my opinion. And they actually blew up his car and all kinds of things, and had an effigy of him with bullet holes. And I can't believe it was just a UFO sighting. That's all he wanted to talk about when he was, it was out late at night. I think it was like 2 in the morning or something like that. And by the way, if you are listening to the podcasts and you actually have the feed going in your podcast player, whatever that is, Charles now is reading he's doing an audio blog. So each week he'll do the blog as always in print, and then he'll do an audio blog. So you'll automatically get that audio blog in your podcast feed. So look out for that. I've posted a couple of weeks. I already have this week's blog. Getting back to our website, while you're there, there's a link to our Facebook page. As I mentioned, we are live as well on Facebook. We also have a link to our Patreon page. Anyone can support the show. And I want to thank each and every one of you that do. I really appreciate that. And I want to thank all of my listeners. And by the way, for those of you like Alejandro Rojas and myself, the reporter that we had on this show for many years doing news, I'm actually helping him on Open Minds every Friday, except I can't this Friday. I actually have a little bit of work to do. But every Friday, I do his podcast with him over there. And it's about 45 minutes to an hour long. And we just talk about the latest UFO news. So check that out over there. You can actually put that. That's a free show. put it in your podcast feed as well. And let's see. Before we get to our guest, I do want to take a little bit of a zag. I have mentioned many times that I like talking to people outside of the UFO stream, so to speak, that have had an encounter. I first met Jamie when I was in my mid-20s. I used to own an antiques restoration shop, and he came in the door. I liked his personality. I hired him right away. We had a lot of laughs together and worked together. Jamie, how many years ago was that? I don't even want to think about it. Welcome to the show, Jamie.
Thanks, Marty. Thanks for having me. I think that was going on, it was 1982 or 3.
That sounds about right.
That's right. So that was, I was a freshman and a sophomore in college at the time. And
the weirdest coincidence about that whole thing is my aunt that lives in Long Island in Levittown, where there's 1 million houses. I don't know, thousands, tens of thousands of houses.
25,000 houses.
25,000 houses. Well, that's quite a cry from 1 million. But anyway, you were a neighbor of hers.
Yes.
And you ran into her, and it's like, oh my God, my neighbor from Long Island and my aunt. I mean, what's the coincidence of that? I mean, that's pretty far out there, but
it's pretty amazing. And
yeah.
But that work experience with you was fantastic, and I really enjoyed myself, and I still use all those great talents that I learned from you to this day. Restoring, boats and furniture and everything else still goes on. So I stole all your secrets, but I don't share them with anybody.
I'm actually restoring a boat right now that washed up on my shore. It's a lot of fun. It's
really?
Beautiful mahogany. Anyway, I'm having a good time with that. But anyway, let's hear about you had a UFO encounter back in 1985.
I believe it was summer of 1985. And it happened, I saw it. See, it was just about dusk. So that was in midsummer, around 8:30, 8:45. And it was in Rye, New Hampshire, where I was living at my parents' house at the time. And I had a friend come by to pick up a surfboard that I was doing some work on. And we got to chatting, and we looked over the tops of the trees, and he said, "What do you think that is? It looks awful low." And I said, "I don't know." And it looked to me, definitely, it was illuminated from inside. It also looked at times like it had a very metallic finish. It was sinking below the tree line. It rose up, and we were both watching it, and we looked at each other and had, I still see this guy who saw it with me, and we kind of looked at each other, and it sunk below the tree line, and it rose up and basically just vanished, just like you read about it. It just completely vanished and disappeared at a great speed. It wasn't like a camera shutter going off. It seemed like it moved, but we didn't see any trail to it at all.
Yeah. And any sound?
None.
No sound. That's always the baffling part.
Yeah, there was no hum. There was no motors. There was nothing. I'm a pilot. I received my pilot's license back in 2000. My dad was a pilot in World War II. I know a lot of pilots. They're fairly reasonable people.
Yeah.
And
Look, Jamie, you there? Jamie, you froze. I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, that's a shame. Well, looks like I'm going to have to take him out, unfortunately, of the show. That was my friend Jamie. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened. Let me try to bring him back in. Oh, it's not working. All right. Well, I'm sorry that happened. Jamie, I don't know if you can hear me still, but thank you for telling that story. I know we were going to get into your dad had some stories about UFOs during World War II. But thank you, Jamie. That was good for the time you were here. And maybe the storm hit him down there. I'm not sure if that's what happening. But anyway, I wanted to play this clip because I played it last week and I edited it down a little bit because it actually features what I'm going to be talking about this evening. You may remember this from last week.
What are you investigating right now? What have been some things that have come up in the last couple of months that you're looking into?
Well, we have a very interesting case in Muscatine, Iowa, just comes to mind. Sometimes, you know, animals are the first things to give warning that something strange is going on.
Anytime. In California, for example, before an earthquake, the animal kingdom is aware of it long before we are. They do things.
Now, we had a letter from a chap saying that what first called my attention to something going on was the fuss that the horses were raising in the barn. But this time it's rabbits. It's a rather interesting story. There is a chap that runs a toll gate at Muscatine, Iowa, across the river there. And he runs from the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift.
What's the all-night do? Okay.
Yeah. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, it has been his custom for quite a while to feed the wild rabbits. He takes carrots and tosses them out, and the rabbits grab a carrot and dash off. At this time, at 10 minutes to 3, he goes out there and the rabbits are just lying flat and immobile on the cement, just absolutely not dead.
Okay.
But just as though they were petrified, paralyzed. And simultaneously, as soon as he sees that, he hears a humming sound, loud humming sound, and a large yellow object rises from across the river and comes across. And the whole thing lasted for some 6 minutes. As soon as it was gone, the rabbits jumped back to life and scurried off. And also, at the same time, we're still investigating, there was a concomitant power outage in Muscatine. Now, we don't know whether that had anything to do with the UFO or not, but it may have.
Usually there is some kind of a power fluctuation or power outage.
So those are the sorts of things that we investigate.
All right. And but you have no, the jury's still out on this one.
The jury's still out on that one, yeah.
Well, Linda, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, and what a great clip.
Yeah, and you watched it last week. You were watching the show last week, and so you did some. And my mistake, that was Tom Snyder's show back in 1981, not in '78 like I had thought it was, because you did some investigation. Let's talk about that.
Yes, I had not heard the story of the paralyzed rabbits, so I contacted Mark Rodiger over at QFOS, and he was kind enough to send me information. And the event in Muscatine there happened at July 22nd, 1981. And the toll taker's name was Al Wagner, and Dr. Hynek, got the gist of it correct. He went to feed the rabbits, and they are laying flat with their legs stretched out and looking like they're dead or paralyzed. And this craft, as it's rising up, heading towards the bridge over the Mississippi, is moving, he said, in a step-like pattern. It would move up, over, and apparently very closely cleared the bridge, just clears the bridge. This sighting lasted about 6 minutes. When it finally moved off, the rabbits jumped up, took off. They did not eat their carrots that night, so whatever this was traumatized them enough that they weren't going to get their free meal. And I think this is a fabulous case, because what was it that petrified the rabbits to such a degree that they wouldn't eat carrots, that they froze like that? So hopefully we'll be getting into some of the science that may be behind this, and a lot more of these cases.
Yeah, have people researched this part of, because animals have always reacted to unusual things, and often, like right now, I live right on the water, so there's ducks and all kinds of things in the yard, and they're all gone right now, and the weather's coming. But that's a weather anomaly,
right?
Not something like an earthquake or something strange like that. But there's definitely and they have senses beyond ours.
Absolutely. And yes, some people have, some of the databases have animal reaction categories. There was an excellent report done by Joan Woodward of MUFON. It was just a fabulous study with lots of charts and statistics. But for the most part, when you hear a story, all you'll hear is, well, my dog was barking like crazy, so I went to see what it was and saw this UFO. And, I've personally interviewed hundreds of people, and I can't tell you how many dozens and dozens of sightings never would have taken place if it wasn't for the animals alerting the people to what was going on.
How about that? How about that? Linda, let's just take a step back a little bit, because a lot of people, I have a lot of new listeners here, and a lot of people may not know who you are. I think last time you were on the show was in 2016, something like that.
Oh, okay.
You did. I know you called in and talked to at least once, but if you can, just give your background. And I know you're on TV all the time now, right?
Twice a week currently on different shows, which is fun. I never thought I would be writing and speaking about UFOs. I was a research scientist for a medical diagnostics company, and I started writing for fun and lecturing about local history. And it seemed that regardless of whether I was giving a science lecture or a lecture on the Civil War, people would come up to me and start telling me their UFO stories. And I'm like, why are you telling me this? Were you here for my lecture? Did you miss something? And they said, no, we see the way you do research and the way you relate, the material and tell the story, and you should tell this story. And the fact that I was born and raised in the Hudson Valley, which has had several really huge waves of sightings, certainly helped. So I started writing and lecturing about Hudson Valley UFOs, and still do to this day. And this topic of animal reactions kind of grew out of that, a little avenue to follow, because as I said, interviewing people throughout this region, I can't give, I'd say half the time, at least, that's conservative, their stories would start with, all the dogs in the neighborhood were barking like crazy, or my dog was barking, or my cat suddenly bolts and hides under the bed, or the horses are trying to kick their way out of the barn. And, you hear enough of these and you say, well, wait a minute. Is it just sound? Is there something else going on? So I started collecting all these cases, and to me, it's fascinating. And I think we can learn a lot about future research techniques, and also go back and re-examine other cases, which I have a list tonight to discuss of well-known cases that had animal reactions in them.
Wow. How about that? I've heard the saying before, I don't know who said it, or maybe I've heard it a number of times, that, we would have many less reported UFO sightings if people weren't out for a cigarette break or walking their dog. Now, are there cases where, people are actually walking the dog and the dog goes nuts? Have you ever heard of those?
Yes, many. There was a good one from Cresskill, New Jersey in 1968. This woman and her friend are walking the 2-year-old German Shepherd by the name of Hans, which I think is a great name for a German Shepherd.
Yeah.
And she said that Hans was extremely protective. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a German Shepherd, but when they're in protect mode, there is nothing on earth that's going to stop them. So they're walking Hans along. They're by a schoolyard, and they see a dumbbell-shaped UFO. And Hans is so terrified by this. They don't hear anything, but obviously Hans is sensing something. This big, brave, fearless German Shepherd starts whimpering and trying to dig a hole to hide in.
Wow.
So, yes. So they figured, if Hans is scared, maybe we should get out of here. And all three of them ran home.
Wow. Now, someone just put this up. Maybe there's an electromagnetic component as well.
Yes.
And we can talk about that later. Just keep that. But I remember I had someone on this show that was talking about a military base where they had all these German shepherds in like a pen, and something was going on with them. I can't really remember what it was, but he was in Florida, and he talked about this. He was right near the swamp. I forgot what base it was, and all of a sudden, all the insects, it was dead quiet, which is really, really bizarre. He says,
Right.
because your ears almost hurt with the noise of the insects there. And it was dead quiet. And the dogs, I can't remember, they were reacting somehow.
Usually the dogs react in great fear, but they can also react quite uncharacteristically and be unnaturally silent and still. So we'll look at both of those cases, and we will absolutely get into the electromagnetic possibilities, which is, I think, my favorite aspect of this. But I just want to go back to Dr. Hynek briefly, because in 1967, in Ithaca, New York, you may be familiar with the Great Ithaca Flap. Dozens, if not hundreds, of witnesses saw these craft, and the official explanation, if we can call it that, was that students in nearby Cornell University were taking those laundry bags, you know, those thin plastic dry cleaning bags.
Yes.
And they were attaching little frames with, you know, like sterno or some sort of burning fuel, making these small hot air balloons and launching them. And supposedly these were what were flying over the town. Despite the fact people were seeing nuts and bolts saucers within 40 feet of themselves and could describe them in great detail, the official excuse were these hot air laundry balloon bags. So Dr. Hynek actually went, and he was investigating this case, talking to witnesses. And I want to read a quote from him, where, because the dogs were barking like they were in pain. Cats were so terrified during these sightings, they were literally running into walls and furniture as if they were disoriented, in complete terror, trying to hide. I have never been a shepherd, but apparently the cows were moaning, and I guess that's not a good thing if you're a cow. Horses were shrilling, were these shrill cries. So he said that the distress of animals is a strong point. Animals don't hallucinate as humans do. And I think when and if I write the book on animal reaction cases, that will be the lead in line, because skeptics are always saying it's mass hysteria. You're mistaking normal, conventional, either astronomical or some sort of craft for something unusual. But I think we can be assured that a cat inside who's not even seeing these alleged laundry bag balloons going by is not going to run into a wall in terror. These animals are not going to react with this excessive fear because a little lighted balloon is silently floating by. So I think this is key for any investigator. Ask the question. You know, don't lead your witness, as in everything else. Ask the question, were there any animals nearby during this sighting, and did they have some sort of reaction? Because I think we can discount the hot air laundry bag theory just based on animal reactions in this flap.
Interesting. And I know somewhere you say that animals don't have an imagination. I think that's a great point. I mean, you know, they're reacting to something. Mm-hmm. And yeah. So I don't know if you want to talk about any particular, you want to go into some other cases that are really fascinating?
Yeah, I certainly would.
And let me just ask you this. You know, I mentioned the insects. I know they're not really animals, but is that all part of this too? I mean, does that ever come up?
Absolutely. As you said, insects going completely silent. There was a case near a swamp. Like you said, it can be deafening. The bullfrogs, the insects, the God knows what, which making swamps, sounds in the swamp. And that when a lighted craft was coming by, everything in the swamp went dead quiet. And that has to really creep you out. If that doesn't get your attention,
Yeah.
what is going on that's affecting the amphibians, the insects, the birds, whatever mammals are nearby? We really need to start paying attention in greater detail to these cases of animal reactions.
Really? Wow. Wow. Yeah, that must, I just can't even picture what that would be like to have everything go quiet like that.
Yeah.
Really, really bizarre.
It would
Yeah.
be getting your attention. But one case I want to talk about, I've already mentioned that dogs in particular can act in great fear and they can be still. And this is a case from Uruguay in 1977. And it was a farm, and, a lot of farmers have watchdogs. And they described a disc, like a Saturn-like object, lighted up, that was either hovering very low in the field or had landed. Now, the farmer's watchdog sees this. He takes after it in attack mode. And again, when a dog is on an attack mission, nothing should stop him short of getting attacked back. Well, 15 feet from this craft, the dog stops short, sits down, and starts howling. What is that? What force has acted upon this dog? You would think if it was an irritating sound, they would run the other direction. But to go from, in a split second, in a heartbeat, from full-on attack mode to, well, I'm just going to sit down in here and howl till the craft moves away. I just found that fascinating.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. Anyway, I have Jamie's actually back. I just want to bring him in just for a second. Is that okay?
I would love to hear the World War II stories.
Jamie, you lost power.
Yeah, we did. We lost power and everything shut down. But sorry about that. I'm back.
And you're on your generator?
Actually, we're back on the grid.
Oh, you're on the grid.
Yeah.
Linda, I hope you don't mind. You said you'd like to hear the World War II story? I'd like to hear that.
I would.
Yeah.
So please take me off and let Jamie continue.
I hope people don't get upset. Linda, we'll be right back with you.
No problem.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I forget where we left off exactly, but
we left off the end of my only UFO sighting that I thought I had was that one at my parents' house in 1985 with a friend of mine who witnessed the whole thing. And I still see him from time to time. And the first thing he says when I see him is, "Hey, do you remember that crazy craft that we saw?" Yeah. And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I still see the guy." And it really left an indelible print with him as well. So yeah, that was my experience that I had. So,
and was it your father or your wife's father that had this sighting, the like similar to the Alaska sighting?
Yes, my wife's father, who told me the story, and he was a pilot. It was a military pilot, an AWACS pilot, for 20 years, and then went into American Airlines for another 20. And I had, because I'm a pilot as well, I just, I'd like to hear stories about flying. And of course, I had asked, what was the strangest thing that's ever happened to you while you were flying? And he just, not a lot of detail, as most of the old pilots are. They just have, to the facts.
Yeah.
And basically just said he saw something that was unidentifiable, very large aircraft carrier size, craft, much like the size of a shelled walnut, moving at speeds that was impossible for any sort of craft he's ever seen before.
Do you know if he? It's really tough for pilots to report something like that. There is NICAP. It's called NICAP. That's one place that pilots can feel safe about it. Do you know if he talked about this or reported it after it happened?
He spoke about it. Well, this was while he was flying with American Airlines.
Yeah.
And I think it was a little bit easier to talk to fellow co-pilots in the flying commercially than it was with the military co-pilots. I know he had a discussion about it with his co-pilot, his commercial co-pilot, but it was, it was one of those things where you just didn't actually talk about it in the military. You just said, okay, well, if I have to report it, I'll report it. But that usually meant that, you were kind of put into the back burner if you reported things like that.
Yeah.
From what I understand.
That's definitely happened. People have had to take a desk job for just reporting something they saw that could have been a danger. And
yes.
And your father, like World War II, like, have you ever heard of the Foo Fighters?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Is that kind of what, he had an idea what he thought these things were or something, right? He
did. He was a B-17 pilot, and he was stationed in the Aleutians. And, he didn't really give a lot of detail about what he saw because they were, well, let's face it, he was 22 years old piloting a B-17 with the lives of 9 other men in his control, well, in his guys. So I didn't think he really wanted to be afraid. You could be afraid when you were a good leader, and good leaders were few and far between. I think at 22 years old, that was a lot to ask.
Yeah.
But yeah, he and his friend, who ended up being very high up in General Electric back in the day, did get together. And he was in World War II as well. He was doing sonar work with submarines, but they were also doing some work with aircraft and tracking submarines and dropping sonar buoys to find out, where enemy submarines were. And he did tell me, he was much more open than my dad was about that. He did tell me that I would be, I think, quote unquote, crazy to believe that the government didn't know exactly what these things were. And he said they were definitely not from this earth. Now that came directly from him to me. And he had no reason to tell tales of fancy. He was toward the end of his life, and I was pretty moved by what he had said to me. I was, and your dad, something to the extent that your dad knows that as well. But
wow,
that was pretty moving to me. That was probably the most moving statement to make me think that these things were not just flights of fancy, weather balloons, swamp gas, all the other things that we've heard as kids and young adults. But that was really important for me to hear, because I realized that a really smart man who had nothing to lose by telling this to me told me that. So that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, excellent. Jamie, thank you so much, and thanks for popping back in when the power came back.
Yeah, sorry about my blackout there.
Yeah, no problem at all. You take care.
Me, I appreciate it.
All right. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Talk to you again.
Yeah. Bye-bye. All right. So, Linda, there you go. Thank you for being so gracious. And I hope you made a mental note of where we were at.
Yes. Yes. But I love the World War II stories. I love the stories from veterans. they have these incredible stories to tell, and a lot of them had been intimidated or just outright told, don't talk about this again. So
Yeah.
hopefully more will come out, in the later parts of their life when they realize, nothing can be done to them, hopefully, at this point. So,
Yeah.
but let's get back to a couple of cases. I do want to talk about the potential science behind this. So we're going to get a little technical, which I know you kind of enjoy.
I do.
Good. Hope the listeners will. But two more stories before we get to that.
Sure.
1983, Sandy Hook, Connecticut. There is a 175-pound Great Dane by the name of Thunder, aptly named. And Thunder, as the owner said, went crazy by the back sliding doors going to the yard, barking like crazy. And when the owner looks outside, he sees one of the massive V-shaped craft, which were all over the Hudson Valley in Connecticut in the 80s. And the craft hovered there for 20 solid minutes. Finally, the craft moved off, but poor Thunder was so traumatized, even the next day, they couldn't get him out the door to go into the backyard.
Wow.
So whatever this is, if you've had a dog during 4th of July, somebody in the neighborhood sets off fireworks. They're scared for a few minutes. Usually they get over it quickly. Next day they're fine. But when a dog doesn't, want to go into its backyard, that's its territory. That's its domain. Mm-hmm. And when it's afraid to even go back into its home territory, it's very traumatized.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one other.
Did that take a few days before the dog actually got back to normal?
It was a couple of days, yes, before it went. But this next case I want to talk about, it took the animals involved a full week to return to normal behavior. And one thing I should bring up, you're a pet owner, right?
Yep.
You know your pet sometimes better than your friends or your family. Mm-hmm. You know when they're upset, when they're happy, their moods. So when a pet owner tells you this is completely uncharacteristic behavior, you can believe them because they know. Yeah. They know when their animal is frightened beyond any normal circumstances they've ever encountered. So this was a case February of 1992 in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Very similar again to the Hudson Valley wave, massive silent triangles, numerous witnesses all in the area. And this case involves dogs, cats, parrots, and another terrified rabbit. Now, the parrots are going to be key here. So if you're keeping an animal reaction scorecard, write down parrots. Dogs were terrified, running circles through the house, just in an absolute frenzy. One hid under the bed all night. Again, they didn't want to go out of the house for days. Cats terrified, and I have never owned a parrot, but apparently when they're alarmed, they puff out their feathers and dance around. Have you had a parrot?
I haven't, but a friend of mine had one, and so I was familiar with they couldn't leave that thing alone. They always had to be with it. So they really knew that thing. Yeah. But it behaved, it misbehaved sometimes. Yes.
Parrots tend to do that. As all large birds, you try to bring in the house. But so here we have and again, of course, the rabbit was terrified. So there was no sound that the people could hear, but you might jump to the conclusion, and, rightly so, well, animals have superior hearing, so maybe it was just high frequency sounds. But we're going to get to that, and that parrot's going to throw a monkey wrench in the whole works here. But again, it was a full week before all of the animal's behaviors return to normal. So, and these were not prolonged sightings. The craft would slowly move over a house or the neighborhood, but whatever it was that was affecting the animals took them days and days and days to get over it. So, what is going on here? It just fascinates me. So, should we get into some science now?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to.
All
Yeah.
right. So, talking about hearing, we're going to talk about different senses, and humans' range of hearing when they're young, as we all get older, we start losing our range of hearing, is from about 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. So an easy way to remember it, I always remember it as 2020. So 20 to 20,000. Now a dog is 67 hertz to 45,000. So more than double a human's hearing. That's why we have them for guard dogs. Rabbits up to 49,000. Again, that's why they have the big ears. Cats, probably of the domestic animals, have the broadest range. Their range is from 48 to 85,000 hertz.
Wow.
More than 4 times. So many people tell me, oh, my cat is crazy. He's always acting like he's hearing something, because he is. They hear 4 times better than us. I read an article where it said that a mouse in a wall making an ultrasonic squeak can be heard by the cat, in the next room. So that's how cats hunt.
Yeah.
And so we might think all the cases I've spoken about so far, it's because there are some sort of irritating high frequency sounds. But now let's get to those pesky parrots. Their range of hearing is from 200 to only 8,500 hertz. So less than half of a human. So if there was some sort of irritating sound that agitated those 3 parrots, the people should have heard it.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and chickens too. Now I know, there's a reason we call people chickens, because chickens are very fearful, but chickens react in a lot of these cases, especially when craft or lights are very, very near to them. But their range of hearing only goes up to 2,000 hertz. So only 1/10 of our range of hearing. So we can't put high frequency sound as an excuse for those cases either. So we have to look elsewhere. But I think the important thing is here, when you are doing an investigation, say in an area where there's been a lot of activity, some sort of flap, having some sort of high frequency detectors should probably be standard equipment. And I know some groups are doing that. But, I, for one, would like to know what it is they're sensing. And if you can detect the high frequency, I think that gives us one more data point is it something about their propulsion? Is it something about the energy fields they create? So what do you think of sound as an explanation to all this?
It could be, someone just posted about a comment here that I thought was this one right here. I thought that was really interesting. Mary Grace.
That is a possibility as well. And we are also, we may not hear infrasound, but it, of course, can affect us biologically. So these are all different parts of the spectrum that we need to investigate in relation to these cases. So the birds that don't have great hearing, what they do have is something called mechanoreceptors. we want to get technical, they are Herbst corpuscles, which are essentially elongated nerve cells that are extremely sensitive to vibration and pressure. Now, some people do report like a tingling when a UFO is close, but we don't have the capability that these birds do to sense that. So is that what made the parrots so agitated? Is there some sort of vibration going on or pressure exerted by these UFOs? So I think that is another avenue to explore. Now, cats, of course, they have this fabulous hearing, but cats have whiskers that are also very sensitive vibration. Fish are probably some of the hardest animal reactions to study because they're in the water, but there have been reports of fish both swimming away in terror and also being attracted to a craft that's hovering over the water. Now, if you've ever seen a fish, if you've been a fisherman, you see they have those lateral lines on either sides of their body. Those are very sensitive also to vibration and pressure. So could this be also the excuse for those paralyzed rabbits who are also very sensitive to pressure and vibration? Was it a combination of the sound and the pressure and the vibration? So, I don't have answers here, or not a lot of answers, but hopefully I'm raising questions that researchers will take and say, A, any future investigation, I need to consider this, and B, maybe I need to go back to all the old files and see what was said about the animals involved.
Yeah. Is that what, have you actually gone through files just looking for where they'll mention the animals?
More hours than I care to admit. Yes, I will sit there with a screen full of files and just go over all of the cases because it's usually something just buried in there. Fortunately, like on the MUFON database, I can search keyword dog, keyword cat, and then pull them out that way. Unfortunately, some of the older unclassified files, you have to sit there and read it. But it will be just the briefest mention. The horses were running around in a frenzy, so I went outside and then it continues. So if people have cases, I would love to hear them because they're all so varied. And I think each one is a little piece to the puzzle we can learn from.
So getting back to the range of hearing that a lot of these animals have and why it wouldn't make sense why a person didn't hear it and the animals did. So are you saying that, is this just kind of a way for you to talk about it has to be other senses?
Well, in the case of the birds, the chickens and the parrots in particular, yes, we have to look elsewhere. I think probably dogs who are barking like mad. There was a case in Congers in the 90s where someone said, Congers, New York, they're by a lake with some friends, and they, they're having a good time. They're not paying attention to anything in particular. And they said, I think the words were, all of the dogs in the surrounding neighborhood went ballistic, howling and barking. And this was probably a full 5 to 10 minutes before this undulating, almost snake-like lighted craft came into view. So in that case, I would probably say it was the dog's superior hearing that heard some sort of high frequency sound or some type of sound beyond our range that alerted to them to something coming from that distance. So you have to really look at these as in a case-by-case basis. But clearly there are cases where sound won't cut it to explain all of what's happening.
And so what do you conclude out of something like that?
I think probably the propulsion, if you believe these are nuts and bolts craft, which I know there's all sorts of interdimensional theories as well, but I think there's something solid and physical about a lot of these craft that generates a very high frequency, over 20,000 hertz, beyond our range.
Sure.
That attracts, irritates, disrupts, agitates cows, horses, dogs, cats, and a whole range of animals. And one thing I found that was extremely important, I mentioned Joan Woodward's wonderful report for MUFON. There was one little line she had in there, which I think is crucial. It said the shape of the UFO made no difference on animal reactions. Now think of the implications. So many people say all triangles are government secret projects. Mm-hmm. Well, if a dog, cow, whatever is reacting the same to a disc, a cylinder, a triangle, a sphere, or some random shape, to me that means all of these craft share similar characteristics. Again, is it the mode of their propulsion? Is it the energy fields they're generating? I think that is a huge statement. Does it talk to a common origin of all of these different shapes of craft? Because some people speculate, you know, this group of aliens has the triangles, this group of aliens has that. Yeah. Unless they're all sharing technology, this may also speak to a common origin.
Isn't that something? Wow. Would have never thought of that. Yep. I had not Shermer. I had Michael Schrad on, mm-hmm. and yes. He was talking about, you know, it's almost like some of these craft are like the new model. You know, right. You see them, and I've thought of that often too. It seems mm-hmm. like, you know, a lot of times you'll see people be talking about discs for so long, the flying saucer, and then I mean that's what I saw in 2006, and I don't know. People seem to be talking more about triangles now. A lot of people talk about lights in the sky. You know, that's a total different thing when you don't see actually physical craft. But what about orbs? The same thing happening with them?
Yes, in this particular study, it didn't seem to matter. I do have an orb case. Let me just. I don't want to get the wording wrong on that. I have so many notes. You know, I get a little obsessive with this, but yeah, here's one where they saw two bright red orbs. This was Ontario, Canada in April of '68. Two bright orbs. Horses were in a panic, running around in a circle in a field. Now, unfortunately, they didn't say, was it a circular corral? Were they just in an open field? Because if horses are just running around in a circle, was their electromagnetic field disrupted? Were they disoriented in somehow? Or was it just a noise? The cat reactions were really bizarre. There were 3 separate cats in this particular case with these red orbs. One was found lying on its back with its legs up in the air, like it was comatose. They couldn't revive it for the longest time.
Wow.
Suddenly, it jumps up, takes off. They never see it again. It never comes home. A second cat takes off, never comes home. The third cat, which they said was extremely alert, normally, when these red orbs were there, a car was backing up. It didn't even move. And unfortunately, the cat got run over and killed.
Oh, my God.
So completely uncharacteristic behavior. to the point where one cat dies and two are never seen again. They're so terrified, traumatized, they won't even come home. So again, that was a red orb story. And I think we can put that in the category with all of the others, that the reactions seem to be the same, whether they're orbs, spheres, discs, rectangles, triangles. I really, I can't put my finger on it, but to me, intuitively, it would seem that this is an extremely important point for everyone to look at.
Yeah. What about wildlife?
Yes, absolutely. Deer, bears, foxes. I have, when we get to the magnetic part, I'll talk more about foxes. But, and I will also, let's save that a little, because when we get to the famous cases,
Yeah.
I definitely want to bring that up. But if we could, I want to just go over a few. I want to talk about a couple of other senses and then
Sure.
get to magnetic fields.
Oh, yeah.
And, if you want to take a break, that's fine, but I'm ready to keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going. Sure.
Okay. So when we go back to dogs, some of these cases seem to affect the sense of smell. Occasionally, you've probably heard people smell a sulfurous odor on occasion, but dogs who, particularly landing sites, there was a case where there was a area where the grass was packed down, and the guy and his friend are going to look at this area. The dog takes one sniff of it, goes crazy, and takes off. So whatever it was left some residue of an odor that was extremely, upsetting to the dog. Now, we have about 6 million olfactory receptors. Dogs have about 300 million.
It's amazing because the tracking, how they can track, like a skin cell, every so many, whatever it is, it's amazing.
Right. Bloodhounds,
Yeah.
bomb sniffing dogs. They have dogs who can sniff out cancer in people.
How about that?
It's phenomenal. So at least 50 times, and they smell a little differently as well. So superior, which I have to jump on a soapbox quick, because it drives me nuts when people smoke around their dogs. That has to be torture to the poor things with their sensitive noses. So, just be cognizant. If you love your dog, keep it away from bad smells. But
I second that. I'm a dog lover. So
I don't want to alienate the smokers out there, but really think about your poor pets, all pets. But the other thing a dog nose can do is, they're more recently figuring this out, is detect thermal radiation. Basically, they have a heat-seeking nose due to it's the structure called the rhinarium, which is basically the cold, wet nose.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Do you ever wonder why your dog has a cold, wet nose?
Right.
Because that's the device it's using to detect heat. So perhaps they are also detecting heat signatures from craft or landing sites or something else. Doesn't mean they'll be upset by it, but they may be drawn to an area because of the heat signature. So the magnetic fields, which somebody very astutely mentioned at the beginning of the show, I think this holds the greatest promise for research in this field with the magnetic fields. Now think of homing pigeons. How do they do that? How do you release them miles away and they find their way back? Well, they can literally see magnetic fields. I read a paper where someone was recreating by illustration what they believe the birds see. And imagine this your field of view, and these grayish kind of semi-transparent lines going off into the distance, bending, moving. They're like road maps in the sky for these birds. That's how they navigate, because they're seeing the magnetic field.
That's right. Yeah. I saw
Right?
something on that. Yes. Very interesting.
It is fascinating. And dogs have it, cats have it, cows have it. One scientist, a paper I read the other day, he said this ability is ubiquitous in the animal kingdom. Insects, we can put insects, birds, fish. Think of salmon finding their way home.
Right.
And this is going to get a little weird. Probably nobody on your show has ever discussed this, but when a dog is going to go to the bathroom, and everybody can prove this for themselves,
Points north.
Points north. Exactly. The last week, my husband and I are driving somewhere, and there's a dog in a field, and I can see he's getting ready to go, and I stop the car. This is what I do, and I put the app on my iPhone, and I'm aiming it at the dog. He spins around. Sure enough, aims dead north.
That's pretty funny.
To go.
Yeah.
So, why? Why is that? Because apparently they feel more comfortable aiming north, and they can sense that. And this, I think, takes the cake. You've talked about wildlife. You probably know what an Arctic fox looks like. Beautiful white fox.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you've probably seen on nature shows the way they hunt. They jump up in the air and dive down into the snow.
I actually saw a fox in my yard do that for a mouse. Yes.
Yes. Okay. I had a husky who used to do that. Really couldn't understand what she'd leap up in the air and come down.
That's a riot. Yeah.
When a fox is oriented to the northeast, he is 73% effective catching his mouse or whatever type of rodent. That's big. 3 out of 4 times he's going to eat. If he turns the other direction, facing the southwest, that drops down to 60%. That's still pretty good. But all other directions, all other points on the compass, if he's facing that direction when he's hunting, only 18% effective.
Amazing.
That is a 55% drop. You're going to have a lot of hungry foxes if they didn't have this, what's called magnetoreception. So why we have this, I'm saying we with humans, but scientists will not admit we have magnetoreception. The only thing they'll admit is that our brains will have some sort of internal reactions to magnetic fields. But there are proteins in the eye called cryptochromes. And particularly in the eyes of birds, their retinas are filled with particularly cryptochrome 4. And these are photoreceptors, very sensitive to blue light, which helps them see these magnetic fields. There's also magnetite, which I'm sure you know is highly magnetized iron. There's magnetite in the beaks of birds, in the noses of fish to help them navigate.
Isn't that something?
Magnetite is also found in the brains of whales and dolphins. And guess who else has magnetite in their brains? Humans. Really? They have magnetite in their brains, and they have cryptochromes in their eyes. I don't want to get too technical, but there was a study where they genetically altered fruit flies, I think it was, to take away their cryptochromes, their magnetic reception, and they were very disoriented. But they took the cryptochrome proteins from a human, transplanted it into a fly, and their abilities for magnetoreception were restored. So I know we're getting a little far afield, but I think this is crucial, because how many times have people said, I'm sure you've heard them say, I just felt like a UFO was coming.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, heard that many times, yes.
So is that telepathy, or is it magnetic fields? Is it science? We
Huh.
have to, we can't always try to ascribe a magic, explanation to these things. It may be magnetic fields that we're sensing. I think it was probably a survival tool that we had when we lived out in the wild. Now we live inside. We are surrounded with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and EMF fields of all sort. I think it's a use it or lose it type of skill set. But before we move on and to other cases, there is a tribe in Australia. I'm going to butcher this, I know. The Kuuk-Thayori.
Sounds
Whatever.
good to me.
And I practiced that. It's an Aboriginal group, and think of it this way. They are the group whose language gave us the word kangaroo. Okay, so we'll call them the kangaroo group. They have absolutely no words for left and right.
Huh.
If they want to sit down next to you, they will say, could you move over to the southwest? I'd like to sit down. Oh, you have a bug on your northeast leg. Right? They are so attuned to all of the directions. And this is night or day. It's not that they have visual clues from the sun or anything else. There was a linguist who studied their language who was just amazed, and he said they absolutely have internal compasses. So there's also groups in Polynesia, Mexico, Africa, the same thing. They don't have words for left, right. It's all the points of the compass. So,
wow.
Right? How do you explain that? And I'm sure you know people who have terrible senses of direction.
Yeah.
I know quite a lot of those, some in my own family. I love you, unnamed relative, but you can't find your way out of a paper bag. And I'm not saying I had any great senses, but when I was a kid, I remember saying, we'd be somewhere, well, that feels like north. So I think that, and I think if you're out in the woods, any groups of people who are out there for long periods of time living in the woods, I think you start to develop a sensitivity to it.
Yeah, I do want to point some. This is kind of silly, but years ago I was hiking and I didn't believe my compass because it was pointing straight ahead for the way that I was supposed to go back. Anyway, it was like midnight by the time I got back to the camp. Because what people do is if you're right-handed, you go to the left side of a tree when you come up to a tree. And so we kind of go in a circle. But if you don't have, I guess at that time, I didn't have a very good sense of direction because I did not believe my compass.
Well, unless it's spinning in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle.
That's right.
You ought to pay attention to your compass.
I did from that point on, yes. Yeah, lesson learned.
But some people just have that. And again, they say it's this uncanny ability. I don't think it is. I think it's the cryptochrome proteins. I think it's the magnetite in your brain. They did a study with one group in, I think it was Mexico or Central America. They put them in a room, spin them around in a chair, and stop them and say, what direction are you facing? And every single time they knew what direction they were facing.
Oh, wow.
Because
That's amazing.
And I think this explains a lot for people who are having very close sightings. This sense of unease, sometimes disoriented, sometimes a little dizzy. And like we were saying, they knew it was coming. I think that has something to do with the magnetic fields. And we know UFOs disrupt, cars stalling, radios, cutting out, power outages. So I think we have to consider that as part of the puzzle here. Yeah.
And it would have to do with propulsion. What else would it be? It would have to most likely, right?
I would think I would think it's the mode of propulsion. The only other thing is, the way they talk about generating certain fields in front of a craft to move through space.
Yeah.
So perhaps it's something to do with that. Maybe it's life support. Maybe they like freaking out animals by generating EMF. It's speculation, but I think we can say that pretty definitively that EMF fields are generated by all sorts of these craft that not only affect electrical systems, but animals as well.
Yeah. One of the things that I bring up on the show, it's brought it up a lot, is, there's never any sonic boom when these things like take off. Like when I just spoke with Jamie about his thing that just shot off, there was no boom. And that doesn't make any sense. And I'm wondering if that's all part of an electromagnetic. I don't know how that works. That's actually moving air, so
Right.
It wouldn't seem like it would change anything. But
well, the USOs as well that come down at a high rate of speed, go into the water and don't create a huge splash.
Yeah. Strange, huh?
So there has to be some sort of field they're generating in front of them that prevents that. You're going to have to get a physicist on the show to answer those questions. But I think that brings up a valid point. What are they generating to prevent those sounds, the booms and the splashes?
Right. Right.
So I do have. I just want to mention some of the long term before we get into the historic cases.
Sure.
Unless there's any questions that people have at this point.
Someone did have a question. I will remind the people in the chat that if you'd like to ask a question, please do it in all caps so I can distinguish, the question from, people talking back and forth to each other. And someone did have something I did see up here at some point, but it had to do with it was talking back about the sense of smell and how the cadaver dogs in David Pilates 411, where the dogs get freaked out. And he just wondered if you ever looked into any part of that, but that's, missing people a little different.
Well, or could be all part of the same phenomena. I love David Pilates' work. He really looks into all aspects of this. And again, that's a good point with cadaver dogs. This is their job. This is what they train. They look forward to running out in the field looking for bodies. They like to be successful for their handlers, and for them to get to a location and completely freak out, refuse to go on, is highly unusual. So, is it a smell? Did something? I don't want to say paranormal, but something unusual happened at that location that left an unpleasant electromagnetic field. There can be all sorts of things left behind, like that dog hell-bent for that UFO and sitting down and howling. Something stopped it and messed with its mind.
Right. Yeah.
So, I've been talking about some of the traumatizing, lasting effects. I just put together a brief list of, we talked about the animals for a week not behaving like themselves. There was a case of 2 canaries who refused to sing. They were silent for 2 days after a close sighting. So cows, apparently when they are distressed, they don't give milk or give very little milk. There have been cases where the cows are so traumatized, again, a full week of no milk. You can imagine the dairy farmer is none too happy when his entire stock won't give milk for a week. Dogs refusing to go outside. Sheep, this is a big one. 1888 in England, there was a case where over 22 square miles, that's a big area, all the sheep in the area panicked, took off. They said they were found later panting in terror under hedges, and scattered across the whole district. Now, for 22 square miles of sheep to all react to the same, I'd say, was it something seismic, you know, something in the earth, or was it something in the air? Perhaps it could have been a meteor explosion creating a sound that they didn't work, or was there some sort of craft in the area terrifying all these sheep? A year later, 1889, over 40 square miles of another district, sheep were jumping out of their pens and kicking their way out of barns to take off. Oh. Now, again, 40 square miles. All the sheep in this district just lost it to the point where they were risking their safety, bashing their way out of their pens and enclosures to take off, to get away from whatever this was. And, Amazing. You know, yeah, then traumatized for the longest time. There was a case of a horse where something had landed and left 2 circular large burn marks. And this guy's on horseback. He wants to go see what this was because he saw these craft land. The horse definitely sniffing the air near these, would absolutely not go anywhere near these burn marks. And sometimes horses will never, ever, the rest of their life, go past an area or over an area where there has been some sort of landing. So either this is lifetime trauma, or something remains at the site. Maybe it's radiation, maybe it's a smell, maybe it's an EMF field. So these are not the cases where, like we said, you know, your neighbor tossed a firecracker and your dog was scared for 5 minutes. These are cases where you name the animal and it seems to have been affected for a week or maybe forever.
Wow, totally amazing. Well, you have this laid out pretty well, so I'll let you continue on.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to, you know, if there's any questions or you have any comments, you know, if you think I am barking up the wrong tree, so to speak, with these, I just came up with that. You know, I'm, you know, you interview people of all sorts. Does this seem reasonable, rational?
The way you're doing this, you mean? It's absolutely great. Yeah. No, I love it. Love it. Yeah.
Okay. Because, you know, I think I know what I'm doing, but
yeah, you're really getting into all of the reasons and all of the possibilities. And then we're going to get into some cases. So I love it. Oh no, this is really good. Yeah.
Good. I don't want to baffle you with science here. But I think it's important we understand the possible science. I'm not discounting there's not some sixth sense involved as well. But if we can attribute things to all of these superior animal senses, or most of them, then I think that's important, as I said, for future research. So if you're ready to continue.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah.
Okay. So there was the Muscarello case, the incident at Exeter, you know, back in 65, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. The boy and the 2 cops and the lady in the car seeing this object. But also at the same time, at these sightings were going on, dogs howled frantically was the line, and horses kicked madly at their stalls. Now,
yes.
Yeah, so if a horse is in his stall, chances are he's not seeing what's in the sky, correct? Do horse barns have windows? Yeah. So there we're looking at sound, vibration, EMF, possibly, but certainly nothing to do with sight. And then a case everybody knows, the Betty and Barney Hill case.
Just before you move on from that case in particular, I just wanted to say that I had someone on this show that actually saw the stalls where the horses were, and that they were indeed very well kicked in.
Really
the
lasting damage to them.
yes, he never changed that.
Wow.
And it was happenstance. He was just walking on the road where the incident and talking to people and got to meet the person that owned that place.
Does that still exist?
I don't remember how many years ago this was. It was many years ago, but not that, maybe 20 years ago or something like that. Yeah.
Well, if anybody out there, if you have any connections, I would love to have a picture of these horse stalls that again, a horse is risking its safety kicking at a wooden wall like that. So it had to be something. There was another case with horses where the horses were in a complete frenzy, and these were polo ponies, which I imagine are rather expensive types of horses, and they're going ballistic, and the caretaker comes by and finds that one of them has like a 5-inch very deep incision in its hindquarters that is not bleeding. They couldn't understand how this poor horse could be cut so deep. And of course, any horse, let alone expensive polo ponies, you don't keep sharp objects in the stall that they can cut themselves on.
Yeah.
So, and
like Snippy the horse?
Poor Snippy. Yes. Yeah. And, and I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people, they think animal reactions, they think animal mutilation cases. And that's a whole other ball of wax.
Like a horse of a different color. Yeah.
Oh, da-dum-dum.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't have Mac Maloney's. Yeah.
Well, I heard it in my head, so well played, Martin. Well played. So yeah, let's get to Betty and Barney Hill. A lot of people forget there were three beings in the car that night: Betty, Barney, and their dachshund named Delcy. And obviously, Delcy was very scared. I can't recall whether he was hiding under the seat, but Betty later said that for weeks afterwards, Delcy was having terrible nightmares. Now, any dog owner knows when their dog's having a nightmare, their little paws are running and, they're like barking or yelping or growling in their sleep. So something happened to Delcy that traumatized, I guess it's a girl, traumatized her for weeks afterwards, which you would think a normal car ride just wouldn't do, correct? So, I thought that, again, that kind of goes to, the critics who say it was their imagination. They saw the pumpkin light on that hotel and other nonsense like that. Well, that wouldn't traumatize a dog for weeks. And
never heard that angle. Heard about that story so many times, but never that angle.
Right. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying I think everybody needs to reevaluate cases they've looked in, or go back to the literature, go back to all these famous cases. And I mean, I could have brought a list this long tonight of animal reactions in popular cases.
Yeah, some people in chat have posted, like this one right here. Wasn't there animal reactions? I think there was. Yeah.
Yes, there was, and he jumped the gun on. He very good. Because that is my next case. Yes,
wow.
You have a great audience. They know their ufology for sure. Yeah. Jim Peniston said that the animals around us were in a frenzy and wildlife was running by us. So your question previously, what about wildlife?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You name the woodland creature and they were probably running in terror. And John Burroughs said the woods lit up and you could hear the farm animals making noises.
That's right. I remember him saying that. Yeah.
So we have all of the farm animals. We have all of the wildlife in the woods reacting. And what screams at me with this is I am annoyed to no end when skeptics say the Orford Ness Lighthouse was the excuse for Rendlesham. No, I'm sorry. Wildlife who's grown up every night of their life seeing the Orford Ness lighthouse light is not going to run in terror every night as a result. They grew up with this. They're familiar with this. The farmyard animals as well. So again, stick a pin in the lighthouse, because whatever did happen at Rendlesham, I can't say it's alien, but it was something unusual, something unnerving, something disturbing that brought on these reactions of alarm and terror. So,
Right.
Again, I think this is so important to not only say what it could be, but what it absolutely wasn't. So this makes it worth it for me, so I can finally discount that horrendous lighthouse excuse. I know I think I heard Charles Halt say that if I hear that lighthouse excuse one more time.
That must be so discouraging. I mean, when someone's trying to debunk something and they come up with something like that, and you have to hear it over and over again. I can't imagine what that's like. When you actually experienced it, what you saw, or maybe you don't know what you saw, but it definitely was something,
right.
Very, very unusual, and you have to listen to that. That must be awful hard.
Right. And so here we have how many dozens of species of animals, finally putting that theory to bed, because again, from the day these animals were born in those woods, they're seeing that lighthouse light every single night of their lives, right?
Yes, right.
So they suddenly, this night, when these UFOs were there, suddenly didn't say, "Oh my God, there's a lighthouse, run for your life." So I think that this is where the value of animal reaction cases come in.
Yes.
And we can do this with a lot. I have a few others if you want to hear.
Sure.
Keep rolling along. Delphos, Kansas. That was in 71, the strange kind of mushroom-shaped object that left the illuminated ring on the ground.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Ronnie Johnson was the young man at the time. And
it was a farmyard. But can you just, for the new listener, can you basically give a breakdown of that story?
Sure. His dog, his white German Shepherd Snowball, which was a beautiful dog, and his sheep alerted him to something going on. They're all very agitated. He comes out of the barn and he looks, and very, very low is, again, the best way I can describe it is kind of a mushroom shape. And the light is so bright, he's kind of temporarily blinded, as I recall, and his eyes actually hurt him for weeks afterwards. Now Snowball, after his initial agitation, when he comes out and is by Ronnie looking at this craft, he sits down and becomes silent. This is one of those cases where a dog that would normally be aggressive, or at least barking excitedly, just goes quiet. The parents come out. His mother, thank God, took a Polaroid picture. So we still have that to this day, of this kind of illuminated, glowing, luminescent is the word I was looking for, ring. She touches it and it makes her fingers go numb. And I believe that numbness plagued her on and off for many, many years. So what happened after this? Now, Snowball did eventually go blind in one eye. That happens to dogs. Could it have been from damage from this craft? But also for about a week, the sheep wouldn't stay in their pen. They were jumping out. They were doing anything they could to escape. So, and poor Snowball, again, this is his domain. This is the territory he protects. And you know how territorial dogs are. Again, for a solid week, he was so terrified, he would not stay out at night. He would cry and scratch at the door to come in. and completely uncharacteristic of this dog. So this case is fabulous because you have the sighting, you have the physical effects on Ronnie's eyes, you have the trace evidence of the luminous ring. We have a photo of it, and they did do a chemical analysis of it as well and found anomalies in the soil. And I can't recall, I'm sure some of your listeners can tell us what that chemical, was it oxalate, some sort of sodium oxalate?
I'll watch chat, see what they say.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then I believe the soil was also water resistant. It repelled water, whereas soil right next to it was fine. So we have all the elements in this case: human reaction, animal reactions, prolonged animal reactions, trace evidence. This is a fabulous case.
Yeah. And I think it lasted for years where
Yes.
nothing would grow in that circular area at all. I mean, they took pictures of it years later and it was still affected.
Right, right.
So-
And I think he finally plowed it over because so many curiosity seekers were coming to, trespassing to see the circle. But I think he should uncover that circle. I would pay to go see that circle, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it illuminated, I mean, that is really bizarre. Yeah. And
Right.
did as far as you know, the young boy at the time, did he ever talk about it like many years later, discuss it? Like,
I saw him on a show a couple of years ago talking about it. I believe it was him, or maybe, he would have been, it's because that was 71. So, so he would be an older gentleman now. And I think for years he didn't want to talk about it. But he was on a show and he actually showed the researchers where it had been. So I see somebody asking for a photo of the illuminated ring.
yeah,
I don't know if you can.
could probably, someone could probably Google that. Actually, I can put up images on this, but I just can't do it like in the middle of the show here.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Okay.
But it is online because I have seen it.
Right.
I've seen that case, and I saw pictures of it, several years later. It compared it. It's weakened, whatever, the line's kind of weakened, but it's still there.
Yeah,
amazing.
and as you said, I don't think anything ever grew in that particular circle. So, a wonderful case. And, people always usually mention Snowball. Oh, he was barking in it, but they don't. I think you need to start looking at the implications of that. What was it that terrified the sheep and traumatized them for a week? What was it that kept that terrified poor Snowball to not even want to stay in his yard anymore? I mean, that's, a dog's territory is sacred and they will usually defend it. Dogs of all sizes, right? They're very territorial.
Yeah.
And
Are there any other cases that involve like an entire farmyard like this? All the animals?
Yeah, there was a case in near Liège, Belgium, and let me see, that was 1968, where the craft they were seeing was projecting beams of light down into the areas, and the witnesses said they put it as all of the animals in the district. So that's a huge area. All of the animals in the district, the farmyards, everything, were making alarming sounds. So you name the geese, the cows, goats, whatever there was, all of them were affected. There was a case locally here, not too far away, Woodstock, New York area, just a couple of years ago, where a young man is in his summer home and a neighbor has cows and the cows are in a frenzy. So, and this is in the middle of the night, he's afraid, is there some sort of predator attacking or some crazy person attacking him? So he runs out and there is a illuminated, I believe it was a triangle, hovering nearby, and the cows were upset, for days. So when these things happen, it's not an isolated chicken or,
Yeah.
the one skittish cow. The whole barnyard is usually, the horses, the cows, the barnyard fowl, all of them.
Yeah. Now you mentioned a European case. Are there a lot of cases around the world that I know Rendlesham Forest, England, but are you looking into these things all around the world, basically?
Absolutely. I could mention, I wrote down just a couple. Belgium, of course, I mentioned the Canada one, Brazil, New Zealand. New Zealand was the one, Kaharoa, New Zealand. I've probably butchered that as well. 1969, two bright orbs over the field. So here's the orbs again. That's the one that left the circular burn marks, and the man on horseback, as I said, went to examine, and the horse, he said, was completely spooked, reared up, wouldn't go anywhere near it. I'm trying to place, I believe it was Australia, where they were calling them the UFO nests, where there are those swirled, depressed areas of grasses. I believe the horses wouldn't go anywhere near those as well. The Brazilian case, they said that all of the pigs, dogs, geese, and fowl, all the the birds,
Yep.
made a loud disturbance of fear and pain.
Pain.
Yeah, that's very upsetting. So it's every corner of the globe. It goes back, I told you about those cases going back to the 1880s.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a universal phenomenon. It's not just, the skunk works has a triangle that disturbs animals in their testing field. No, this is every shape of craft, every country in the world, at least every continent pretty much, and for well over 100 years.
Excellent. I'm just putting in chat now. Any questions in chat? Just make sure you put them in caps. And I'd like to stay on topic though. If there's any questions you want to ask Linda on this topic and not going off onto other topics, I would appreciate that. So you're welcome. Since we can't take calls, we'd be glad to take your questions in the chat room.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear about other, people's experiences. Maybe now that they're thinking back to, wait a minute, it was a dog or a cat that alerted me. I'd be curious to, what percentage of sightings they've had that actually involve animal reactions.
And can someone get a hold of you easy?
Absolutely. They can get a hold of me through my website, which is gotozim, GOTOZIM.com. Or, just find me. I have Facebook pages all over the place. Hudson Valley UFOs is one of my Facebook pages, or I have two under the name of Linda Zimmermann. Please get in touch with me. I want to hear these cases. That's how I get to do what I do, by witnesses coming forward.
Yeah, we have a question up here. Do you have a case that can be considered evidence to animal reactions as credible as Ariel or Westall? It's kind of hard to compare that. Those are, schoolyard sightings, basically.
Right, schoolyard sight. Well, we have barnyard sightings.
Yeah.
Seriously, you can compare that when every manner of animal, which, in a large farm, there could be hundreds of them, correct? Between the herds of cow, the goats, the geese, the chickens, horses, whatever. And when all of them are either running in terror, hiding, howling in pain, or just making alarming sounds, that's the animal kingdom Westall, I think.
Mm-hmm.
When all the animals in the district of Liège, we're beyond a schoolyard. We're an entire town. When we go to those 1888, 1889 sightings in England, we're talking 22 to 40 square miles of distressed animals.
Yeah.
So I think we're leaps and bounds over your typical schoolyard sighting. As impressive as they are, these events go well beyond that in scope and number of animals affected.
You know, I talked to a veterinarian once, and he said that it was easier being a veterinarian than a doctor because animals don't lie.
Exactly. And that brings us back to, they don't have the imagination.
Yeah.
They're not watching Netflix UFO shows. They're not reading, books on UFOs. They're not affected by popular culture.
Right.
So when something has happened, you damn well better believe that is a real event. I can't say what the nature of the event is, again, the origin of it, but something physical in their environment is affecting them that is well beyond anything that normally ever happens.
Stephen asks, do you think this topic helps or hurts ufology?
Oh, it should help it enormously.
I agree.
It's a huge piece of the puzzle that is unbiased, unaffected by imagination, unaffected by the mass hysteria, supposedly. These are genuine, honest reactions by dozens of different species, again, across the globe. I can't emphasize enough the importance of this field to ufology. Everybody should jump on this animal reaction bandwagon and figure out, what is it telling us?
You know, I'm in touch with a few scientists that are actually looking into this seriously.
Okay.
And they've been on the show, Kevin Knuth, Matthew Sedaris, people like that are based in science, and they really are taking this topic seriously. I'm going to, just run this by them, as another avenue, because I think it's fascinating. Here's another question, not a question, a statement, more or less. Wow, it's hiding you. I can't help but to think these craft are putting on a show on for us in all they do, and affecting the animals is just another way of doing this. To what end? Your thoughts? It's by John.
Yeah, John. Clearly, something the size of 2 football fields lit up like a Christmas tree is trying to get our attention.
You would think so. Yeah.
Yes. And if it's simultaneously agitating hundreds, if not thousands, of animals over several square miles, they are absolutely trying to get attention. And as I said, how many sightings would not have taken place if their animals didn't alert them to it? So
Right.
perhaps that is their little early warning system. We're on our way. The dog is barking. We're coming out to, that knows it's going to draw us out there.
Yeah. This is by Strafe. He actually bought one of my paintings, my UFO, one of my triangle paintings over in England, Scotland. I can't remember. Anyway, Strafe, thanks for the question. Considering the animal kingdom reacts so adversely to the phenomenon, I would like you, Linda, to surmise that these visitors are not friendly. What do you think about that?
They're certainly not kind to the animal kingdom when they terrify them so much. Perhaps it's collateral damage to whatever their objectives are, but they certainly don't seem to care that they are causing fear and pain in all of these species of animals.
Yeah.
So, not. I don't.
They may not even be aware of it. It's a possibility, but they may be aware of it.
I would think they'd have to be aware of it, since it's been happening for the last 100 years all around the world. I would think they'd know what kind of reaction they're causing.
Yeah.
I think UFO and Bigfoot has a connection. I have been avoiding that that subject
And
for
that's by Monica. Hi, Monica. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Monica. You pulled me in. You know, I've just heard too many stories where there are Bigfoot sightings and UFO sightings concurrently.
Yes, there's a lot of them.
There is a lot, and I've heard them from very reputable people. So I am not going to go down that rabbit hole and speculate what it is. But yes, so now you have me on record. Bigfoot was the one topic I haven't pursued. But
I wonder if there's animal reactions to them. You know, I mean, that's just another thought. But we don't have to go there. That's okay.
Thank you. Thank you. How about we go to everybody else's favorite cryptid, Mothman? Or do we have
okay. We have a couple. We have questions coming in, but
we can hold off on Mothman.
But I do want to remind you about that. Yes. Are you familiar with the British researcher Paul Sinclair? He reports numerous events around Yorkshire coast that feature unusual animal behavior associated with UFO.
I am writing Paul Sinclair's name down right now. I may have read some of his cases, but thank you. I will certainly pursue that. He is active now?
I will wait for the answer in the chat and on that. And Tim has a question here too. Linda, do you know if animals or cows in India are left alone by visitors because the Indians are kinder toward them or won't eat beef? You have the sacred cows.
Wow, that is a profound question. I would certainly like to think so. Seriously, I'm a vegetarian myself. I am kind to all living creatures.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
I would love to think that, where are the most of the mutilations in the U.S., correct?
Yes.
I know there are some in Mexico and South America. I know it happens in other places, but perhaps if we show respect to these animals, they will honor that. That's a happy thought. I would like to think that.
Yeah, let's just pretend that happens.
Let's pretend that happens. All
right. We want to get you back on Mothman.
Okay.
Because I do want to say this, since we are not streaming live on KGRA radio tonight, we can end anytime it feels comfortable. So we usually would end in about 7 minutes from now, but we can end. It doesn't matter really when. So go ahead into the Mothman thing, if you would.
So we all know about Mothman and the Silver Bridge collapse in December of 67, but going back to November of 66 and probably a little earlier, there were all sorts of strange sightings all around the area on both sides of the Ohio River, the West Virginia and the Ohio side. And a couple of very disturbing things I came upon. There was a dog named Bandit who was, again, going crazy. The farmer gets a flashlight. He shines it outside and claims to see these two red glowing eyes in a field. Bandit takes off after this, whatever it is, and Bandit is never seen again.
Oh,
I know. This one's even worse. Around that same time, a German Shepherd, again, sees something in a field, there's lights or glowing eyes, whatever. He runs out. They don't find him for days. And unfortunately, when they find him, there is a 20-foot diameter circle of compressed grass. And in the center, unfortunately, is the body of this German Shepherd. And every bone in its body is broken.
Oh, horrible.
There's no blood. There's no external wounds. So what that says to me, there's, no trails really of big animals coming in and out of that circle. So either this dog was dropped in the center from a great height, which we see in cattle mutilations, possibly, because animals with the bones broken and in unusual shapes, or he was under whatever this was when it landed. And so I'm finding these articles and I said, you know what? What happens when someone has a dog missing? They post something in the classified section. So I started looking through classified sections from newspapers from 66, 67 throughout that area. Missing dog after missing dog after missing dog. It was horrendous.
That's crazy.
I know. And it's like, I'm almost sorry I looked, but on the other hand, that really, what is going on? All of these dogs from both sides of the river are suddenly just running off, being taken. I don't know. So, yeah, the classified ads, they tell you a lot sometimes.
How about that? That's great research, Linda. This is the answer that Paul Sinclair is active, and he has a series of books, and he's on YouTube. Thank you, Duncan.
Yes, thank you very much. I will certainly be looking up Paul Sinclair. And if anybody, again, please, anybody get in touch with me. I know there are some databases. I found a couple of older collections where, periodicals we're going to have a series of animal reaction cases. But I know there are so many more out there that people haven't told the stories yet. And I think we need to hear them. One more famous case I want to mention, one of my favorite, the Falcon Lake incident.
Oh, yes. I didn't know. Did he have a pack horse or something?
Not
Falcon Lake?
that I
know he was a geologist looking.
Right, rock hounding.
Yeah.
And Stefan Mahalik. And he is out there rock hounding. And what draws him to these there were two objects in the sky, was, I have to quote him, "A gaggle of geese erupted into terrified honking."
Oh, wow.
So here's a case, the Falcon Lake incident may never have happened if not for this gaggle of geese erupting into their honking. So that's what literally made him stand up and look, see these two objects, and then, for people who aren't familiar, one of them landed. Long story short, he approached it, and there was a vent that burned that grid pattern into his flesh, his body, burned his shirt.
Yeah.
For those who are not familiar, definitely look up the Falcon Lake incident and see the pictures. I mean, it looks like a barbecue grill burned into his chest.
Right.
Just amazing. And there's another case. If not for the geese, how would he have ever noticed these craft?
Yeah. Amazing. Well, Linda, I got to say, I've had a wonderful evening with you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. You can see I'm rather enthusiastic about this subject.
I love when people are enthusiastic and passionate about things. And I do want to say this: it's been too long that you haven't been on the show, so I'd like to have you back again within a few months, if that would be nice to see you again.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
And we could even talk about a different topic, but I got to tell you, this topic in particular, I think you're right on this. I think this could be something that could move, research ahead a little more, because there's so many reasons that the animals make it honest, that something's happening, and it can't be overlooked.
No, it can't. This should definitely move the needle forward on researching new cases, as well as I said, going back over all the other cases, because like Rendlesham, if you can discount that lighthouse and just put that to bed because of animal reactions, that's huge.
Yeah.
I think that's just huge.
I agree. Well, we are getting high winds and rain. We'll lose the electricity anytime. But anyway,
not press our luck.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Linda. You take care of yourself.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye now. All right, everyone. So that is it for this evening. Thanks so much for hanging in with us. And next week we have Tom Conwell on, and I think he's like a biochemist or something, but he's also an electronic engineer, was with Honeywell. He's written a series of books called They Are Here, and he's going to be on the show then. I want to thank everyone that helps out, and I appreciate everyone that listens and helps out with the show. And We'll be back next week, same time. And remember, keep your eyes to the sky.